Ciao Sandro.
Ciao Monica.
Siamo live. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special edition on the StopGlobalWarming.eu initiative, the European Citizen Initiative for Carbon Pricing in the European Union. We are live on the Eumans Facebook page, Stop Global Warming Facebook page, and the network of the European Federalist movement is going to share the streaming. So we are going to have a very federalist audience tonight. And tonight we are here with a few great guests. Monica Frassoni, co-promoter of the StopGlobalWarming.eu initiative. Alberto Majocchi, professor of finance, public finance at University of Pavia, and the scientific lead of the StopGlobalWarming.eu initiative. And Sandro Gozi, MEP and Federalist, that is one of the MEPs that started to support StopGlobalWarming.eu as a proposal. The purpose of this hour that we're going to have together is to go through the meaning and the importance of a policy on carbon pricing in the European Union on two sides. On one side, from an ecological perspective, but on the other side, as an instrument for a more federalist European Union. And so these are the two angles that we will use tonight to tackle the issue. And the experience is going to be very interactive, so you can submit your questions in the comments, and we're going to make sure that our speakers can reply to the comments and have a more interactive experience. So I think the best way to start to talk about this European Citizen Initiative is with Monica Frassoni. Hi, Monica. You are the promoter, together with Marco Cappato, of this proposal.
And Alberto.
And Alberto. Like formally, you and Marco are the two co-signatories. But without the contribution of Alberto, probably we wouldn't have been here tonight. So, Monica, the floor is yours to introduce us to the proposal in itself, but also the meaning for the European Union of this European Citizen Initiative, which we remember, and we will remember throughout the evening. We need to collect 1 million of signatures to make sure that the proposal gets taken into account by the European Commission. So for whoever is watching, you can also sign and get others to sign. But let's kick this off with Monica on what we are doing here.
So the idea of this ECI is, first of all, to set up a European instrument to finance good policies. So this is the real idea behind it. And doing that by giving a price and making more expensive something that is very damaging, should be phased out quickly, which is CO2. So I think that carbon. So what is the real meaning of this is to participate to the very, very complicated but also indispensable work of shifting priorities, of going to do policies and to tax even, and by that, giving an orientation to economic activity and also to jobs. So this is a little bit the idea that is behind. And we thought, and we are of course not the only ones and not the first ones, that the idea of putting a price on something that should be phased out in order to finance the policies that would make this phasing out easier was the most effective weapon that we have in order to accelerate this transition. Because it is one thing that is very clear and it should be always remembered. We are late. It is urgent to change the priorities of economic and social activities, and we have very little time to do it, and we have to do it at an enough big scale so as to be able to have an impact also at global level. So if tomorrow morning the city of Brussels or Belgium or Italy or Germany, as they actually are discussing to do, would introduce this kind of carbon pricing, as I said, they're trying to do it. There is a very big discussion. In some cases, this has happened. This would not have the impact and the scale enough to be able to change the world, really. But whereas if we do it at European level, this, we think, would create a big leverage to be able to have an impact on economy and on priorities. So I think that this is the idea behind it. Is relatively simple as an idea. It's not particularly complicated to be put in practice. But what is difficult is to convince policymakers that this is the right way, and also to be able to overcome what is the big hinder, and that is the need of having unanimity behind any kind of pricing at European level. And we are convinced that through an initiative which is carried by a minimum of 1 million citizens, which means campaigns done everywhere, events like this one also done everywhere, this possibility will be much higher, because we have been seeing over the last years, weeks and months, that unless there is a big mobilization, policymakers do not easily move. Big mobilization or big economic interest with big money used to convince them. So I think that this is the big ambition that we have with this ECI, and therefore we need your support.
Thank you, Monica. Let's focus on the policy in itself that we are proposing. We are using a participatory democracy instrument, which is the European Citizen Initiative, for a very interesting approach. At least I'm not an economist, but I found it quite interesting, because we combine, and this is my question for Professor Majocchi, we combine a solution to reduce CO2 emissions to generate revenues that can be used for the ecological transition on one side, but also from a social perspective to reduce taxes on workers. So can you please, Professor Alberto Majocchi, walk us through the proposal, maybe also with a sight on the social meaning of this initiative and the potential for a transformation of how the fiscal policy in the EU works to a certain extent?
Okay, thanks, Virginia. Thanks, Monica. The main points of our proposal are simple. So we have to put a price on carbon. Everything in our world on the market as a price, but the consumption of natural resources has no price. And it is important to stress that in our proposal, we don't speak of carbon tax, but carbon pricing, because there are different means, and we will see later. Speaking of the German initiative, a recent initiative to put a price to extend the system of permits to a new sector, that it's possible to put a price on carbon without a carbon tax. Our proposal has three main points. The first is the price should be high enough to convince to producer and consumer to change their behavior. So to change their consumption to the consumption of fossil fuels, and to move to a consumption of renewable energy. In our proposal, the price is 50 euro for a ton of CO2 in the beginning, reaching 100 euro in 5 years. This gives a lot of money, a lot of revenue, because more or less total emission in Europe are about 4 billion tons in the last year. So 4 billion tons the last year with a price of 50 euro provides a revenue of 200 billion euro. But this money, and this is the point that Virginia has already introduced in our discussion, all the money, all the revenue should be recycled back to the economy. And the main point is that it can be used to implement a fiscal reform, moving the burden of taxation away from labor and on the use of fossil fuels. Away from labor means that the revenue income tax should be reduced, cut down, mainly for poor people and also for poor regions and regions that are hit easily from moving from coal production to the use of renewables. The first point is that we suggest we need a border carbon adjustment, a carbon duty levied at the border in order that all the imports pay the same amount of price that is imposed, that is levied on European production. This is important from different points of view. And I would like to stress this is the second point of my introduction. With the border carbon adjustment, this is a duty, a custom duty, and as such is immediately a new revenue for the European budget, because we know that the European Union has exclusive competence in the commercial policy, and custom duties are own resources for the budget. And this is important because the discussion of new own resources for the EU budget is moving on following the decision to emit 750 billion euro of securities in order to fund the recovery plan. So this is the custom duty is by itself an own resource. But the last point I would like to address, and probably this is the point that could be more deeply explained by Sandro in his in the intervention, is that we need new resources for the European budget. And for me, it's very important what the proposal that has been done in Germany, because in Germany, there's been an agreement between Bundestag and Bundesrat to extend the emission trading system, the European emission trading system, to new sectors and mainly to transport and to domestic warming. This is important also from an institutional point of view, because the directive on emission trading system has been approved according to the old Article 251 of the Maastricht Treaty. So through the ordinary legislative procedure. This means that it is possible to implement a carbon pricing system if you use the upstream approach adopted by the German authorities or suggested by the German authorities without unanimity in the Council and without ratification by all member states. This makes it easier to introduce a carbon pricing at the European level. So I think that there are many points, many angles that are important for our proposal. First, as Monica suggested, we need to stress the importance on beginning immediately to curb CO2 emission, and this can be done only if we put high price on the use of carbon. The second is to use the revenue of the carbon pricing for implementing a fiscal reform, shifting the burden of taxation away from labor towards the use of fossil fuels. And the third is that it's possible to have new own resources for the European budget, starting from the border carbon adjustment and extending the ETS, the emission trading system, to new sectors and mainly to transport, domestic warming, and in the future also to agriculture. These are the 3 points that, in my view, are important for our proposal.
Thank you very much, Professor Alberto Majocchi.
My name is Alberto.
Not Professor.
Yeah.
You're right. Thank you, Albi. Thank you very much. So next is Sandro Gozi. You are among those who have been very supportive toward the European Citizen Initiative, StopGlobalWarming.eu. And at this stage, I think there are two main interesting debates at the European Parliament level and at the EU level. One is the Green New Deal, and the other one is the Recovery Fund. And to a certain extent, a policy such as the carbon pricing one, it's interesting for both of them. So I would like to know your take on this proposal in the big framework of the reforms that are more and more unavoidable at a European level, and what is the impact that a citizens' mobilization can have to support those in the EU institutions that are in favor of these new sustainable policies that combine ecology and economy.
Well, thank you, first of all. Thank you, Virginia, and a very warm thanks to Alberto, Monica, and Marco Cappato, with the other promoter of this initiative, in which I strongly believe. I'm committed in promoting. You know that I'm very committed in promoting among the Federalist network as president of the UEF. But I'm also working in France, where I have been elected to try to promote the initiative and to try to collect a signature also in the country. Why? For the reason that you have mentioned in your introducing me. It really, I would say, a very strong link between two main priorities of the European Union today. On one side, the Green New Deal. On the other side, the ongoing negotiation of the Recovery Fund. Why this is very important from a federalist perspective? Because I think that the fight against climate change nowadays is the best explanation of why we need a federal Europe. And it's the best explanation for the reason and for the words which have been rightly used before me by Monica and by Alberto. First of all, a matter of scale. We need to identify the right scale to promote effective policies. And the right scale to fight against climate change for us European is the European Union. And only through a stronger action of the European Union, we can really, as Europeans, contribute to an action which is by definition, by nature, global. And this is the first point. When we held the Congress of the Union of European Federalists in November 2018 in Vienna, we had identified the fight against climate change as one of the new priorities to promote federalism, rightly for this issue. The second point it is that you cannot build up a stronger union, you cannot build up a more effective union without providing the union with the new resources. We must provide our union with the means to fulfill our ambitions. And this is the other strong reason why I think that StopGlobalWarming.eu is an excellent initiative, because we need to find new resources to promote sustainable policies. And where do we find new resources? Should we ask more money to the member state? It's impossible. It's politically impossible, and it is very unwise in this period of crisis, post-coronavirus, to ask for more direct contribution for the member state. Should we ask for more resources to the citizens? And why should we do so? The taxpayers are already under a heavy stress at national level. In some cases, taxes should be reduced, in my view at least. So it's certainly not on citizens and on taxpayers that we can find the resources to promote the badly needed sustainable policies we advocate for. So who should pay? The polluters, those who pollute. Those who behave in a way which is not consistent and not compatible with our objective. Those who behave in a way which is very far from the objective of the Paris Agreement and very far from the objective of the Green Deal. This is why the approach on which internally is based on the carbon pricing system, and externally is based on the border carbon adjustment, which means that we ask to pay a tariff to those who make their product outside the union, and then they want to export the product within the union, and they have made their product without respecting specific commitment in the framework of our green sustainable strategies. I think that this is exactly the right approach, because we need resources. We need resources which we can collect by promoting a more sustainable behavior. We produce an extraterritorial effect, if you want, because with the border carbon adjustment, we push on those who are outside union to behave in the way that we think is consistent with our global objectives. So I think that this is exactly the right approach. I mean, this StopGlobalWarming.eu is based on several aspects. This aspect of the border carbon adjustment is something on which the list in which I was elected was insisting since the electoral campaign, as other groups, as the Green. I mean, it's something that now it is on the agenda, but we need your support. This is why I think that those who are listening to us, please sign, because to have 1 million citizens, at least, beyond us, in a moment where this issue, especially the border carbon adjustment, is actually on the table of negotiation, because it is something which has been mentioned, is indicated as a priority by the European Parliament, indicated as a potential new resource by the Commission. There are some governments who are committed to this. To have your support as citizens to go towards this direction is of the utmost importance. And so, I mean, this is why I'm very grateful to Monica, Alberto, and Marco for this initiative. I'm very convinced in promoting that, and we rely on your support to reach as far as possible, as fast as possible, the goal that we are pursuing in our common interest.
Thank you very much, Sandro. I'm not muted, okay. So before going to the next round of questions, and thanks for the boost to the activists and volunteers that are working on the campaign, also because it's important to remember that a European Citizen Initiative, it's an amazing participatory democracy instrument, but it's also quite a challenge. We see in all the people concerned about the environmental issues, this is an invite for everyone who is concerned to spend 2 minutes to put their signatures on the StopGlobalWarming.eu website, because it's a way to use the democratic instruments that we have available in the European Union to try and ask for the change that we want. So it's very important. I see some questions in the chat, so I'm gonna answer because they're more practical, and then we go back to the speakers for a second round. So Amedeo is asking us when is the deadline and how many signatures we have collected, and the minimum quota for countries. So just a educational moment on the European Citizen Initiative. The deadline in theory is the 20th of July. However, because of the coronavirus crisis, it's currently under evaluation, a proposal to extend the deadline for 6 months until the 20th of January. The proposal had been made by the European Commissioner, Jourova, and it's already been approved by the Council and is waiting for the final approval by the Parliament, which should happen at the beginning of July. And most likely this extension is going to happen because, of course, the coronavirus crisis, among other things, reduced the capabilities of being active across the EU. Signatures can be collected online and offline. And the way how we're running the campaign is through every single person feeling empowered and encouraged to share it with their networks. We currently have a few activities. We have a lot of influencers, artists, celebrities that are supporting the initiatives, communities of creative people like the Zuppa community, which is a European network of creatives, is working on that. So it's really something we should embrace and use as much as possible. We currently have collected 35,000 signatures, which is way far from the 1 million. But on the other side, it's really about creating these networks, connections, and different organizations, and people can invite others to sign and get others to sign. And if we really find the right way, the goal is not impossible, particularly having 6 months ahead. So going to the second round of questions, the other way around. So we start from Sandro and we go back to the others. So Sandro, you had been elected in France, and this is a hot topic. Macron tried to have a policy on carbon pricing, and it was very difficult to get it accepted by the citizens in itself. So to what extent do you think the approach that we have with StopGlobalWarming.eu, which is not only, it's a carbon pricing and not a tax, as Alberto explained to us, but also this idea of reducing the tax on workers, how do you think can make this policy more interesting for individual citizens who just don't want to pay more taxes? And how do you think is important in terms of getting it moved forward in the approval process?
Yeah, I mean, you touched a very sensitive point. It is clear that we have to really think what is the most effective way of following these needs to the word that we use. And we are all committed, I mean, all, not all, but I mean, many of us coming from different experiences and coming from different also political position, many of us are very committed to the ecological transition. But as rightly said, the ecological transition must be also socially balanced, especially in period of crisis, and especially in period where the social inequalities are growing between not only within the societies, but especially between urban center and the periphery. That was the main problem that we experienced in France when we tried to introduce a new tax tools to favor the ecological transition and to accelerate the attainment of the objective linked to the carbon neutrality that we want to reach. And this is why, I mean, to have a balance between working on a reduction of labor taxation and identify some strategic sectors such as transport, or such as the adaptation, the development of the ETS, of the emission trading scheme, to reach our goal, I think it is the right approach, because it is clear that the ecological transition must be also socially acceptable. That was the main problem. I think that we have learned the lesson. We have learned the lesson also at the European level. After all, even in the new recovery plan proposal, and we have insisted a lot with the European Commission, we have increased by far the Just Transition Fund. And after all, this fund, which must accompany the ecological transition, must make the transition juster. It responds to the same logics. There are some countries who must make a bigger effort to be able to go along the right line, to attain our common objective of reaching the carbon neutrality by 2015, with a very good important phase by 2030. And so we have, in a perspective of solidarity, in a perspective of European cohesion, in a perspective of common strategies, where we start from different positions, from different levels, we must accompany this transition with the fund. So I think that this is the approach, which is a balanced approach, and which we must insist on, because we cannot oppose the ecological priority and the social priority. On the contrary, they go hand in hand, but they require creative thinking and a new approach to these two issues, as the StopGlobalWarming.eu initiative is a very good example of.
Thank you very much also for answering a tricky question. So we are going on the other way around. In the meantime, I invite everyone who is following this live streaming. If you have questions, you can submit it in the comments, and we will try to bring it to the speakers so that we can elaborate together, both on the initiative, but also on the topic of European federalism. So my next question is for Alberto Majocchi. You are a federalist yourself. You touched it briefly earlier on the topic of competencies, and which are the current competencies of the European Union and which are not. So can you maybe focus a bit more on this element, how a policy like this can be a leap forward for a more federalist European Union in terms of strategy, approach, policy-making processes? I think for the audience that we have tonight, this is an angle that we shouldn't avoid, but actually try to stress as much as possible.
Yes, it's completely correct. So the problem of global warming and of curbing CO2 emission is a global problem. We know that Europe represents about 10% of total emissions. So by itself, Europe is unable to solve the problem. But I think that Europe has an important role to play, because some big country or group of countries like the European Union should take the first step in order to convince other countries that the achievement of the goal of limiting of carbon neutrality by 2050 is possible and could be achieved. From this point of view, for instance, I would like to stress the importance, as Sandro has already said, of border carbon adjustment. Border carbon adjustment is first a question of equity. European polluters pay a price for carbon emission. The same must be true for other countries. But if we put a border carbon adjustment, if Europe adopt a border carbon adjustment, there is a convenience also for other countries to implement a system of carbon pricing, because if they don't have a carbon price, they pay some contribution to the European budget, because as I've said before, the border carbon adjustment is a custom duty, and so is by itself a no resource for the European budget. But for instance, take the example of Russia. If Russia introduces a carbon pricing, the revenue goes to the Russian budget, not to European budget. So this is a way to combine interest with the duty, interest with equity. It's correct that everybody pays for emission, but also is in interest of other countries. The second point, we have said that global warming is a worldwide problem, but this can be solved only through federalism institution. Take the case of Europe. In ecological transition, there is a big role for the European Union, because, for instance, big infrastructure, research, technological development, all this can and should be done at the European level. But there is a big role also for the different level of governments. And in my view, it's very important, for instance, the role of the cities, of municipalities, because much should be done at this level. You must think, for instance, in terms of restructuring our cities in order that they are compatible with the goal of carbon neutrality. We must change the structure of our cars. We must sell more electric cars. We must increase the role, enlarge the role of urban transport, and so on. So this is another point. We should combine policies at every level of government. At the European level, we have big steps forward in the field of technology, in the field of investment, in the field of infrastructure that are needed in order to enlarge the role of renewables. But many things should be done also at the national, regional, and urban level. So this means that we need a federal structure, and this can be done if we go forward towards the final goal of a more democratic, more united Europe with more competence and with a budget larger than the current one. Europe has now a budget that is 1% of GDP. If we want to implement the recovery plan, the suggestion of the European Commission is to reach the level of 2%. For this reason, for instance, carbon pricing is important, but it's also there are other instruments that should be implemented. For instance, a web tax on multinationals that enlarge their trade in different European countries and don't pay taxes sufficiently. And the third one is a corporation tax based on a common consolidated taxable basis. But this puts on the table the question of the procedure for implementing new resources at the European level. Up to now, we are constrained by the Article 311, as Monica has remembered before. This article requires unanimity in the Council, a minimal role for the European Parliament, and ratification by member states. So one possibility is to use, if we, for carbon pricing, Europe use the instrument of ETS, enlarging the role of ETS. This can be done with the ordinary legislative procedure, decided by majority in the Council and with the favor, with a vote by the European Parliament. This is a first problem. The second problem is we are now, many people are suggesting that it's possible to implement a web tax and a corporation tax using Article 116 of the treaty, because these are obstacles to the internal market. So we must avoid paradisi fiscali, fiscal havens. And so this could be another advance towards a federal fiscal union, a second pillar of a federal union in the economic field.
Thank you, Alberto. Monica, I will leave you free of replying to any input that you got from Sandro or Alberto. Like, how do you see the trade union between the social and environmental policies, but also this potential boost toward a stronger European Union through this policy?
The first thing to say is that this link and this connection is not done automatically. What I mean is that it is not because you want to make a green policy that automatically it will be also social. And this is very important because the green transition is something that has to orientate the economic activity, but also has to reorganize the way in which we understand the social relations and the way in which we work. Of course, we know very well that, for example, if you are basing yourself on renewable energy, or you are heating or cooling your house through measures of energy efficiency, you do not depend from a big enterprise to get you the energy to your house, and therefore you are somehow led to decide by yourself. And what I mean by this is that there are some policies that by themselves are accentuating decentralization, participation, and control. But it is very clear that without measures that accompany the transition, notably measures that will make sure that people who are abandoning certain activities will find some other trainings, will find some other possibilities, or will be helped to get out of these activities, then it will be very difficult to have the public support for the green transition. So that's why we as Greens never, ever saw the two elements separated, because you cannot do a workable green transition without also taking social measures. And I think that is one of the most let's say, difficult issues on which you can gather consensus, for the simple reason that, first of all, you need a scale to be able to change really the situation. So you need a big enough policy and a big enough amount of resources so as to be able to reorientate a lot of activities and a lot of people. That is why I really believe that the European dimension is the right one, not only to have an impact for us, but also to have a leadership role at European level. We never have to forget that the biggest push that was given at the beginning to renewables and in general to this new business model was done through the 2020 package that was adopted in 2008 in the European Union, at a moment in which, yes, renewables were actually supported by a group of very freaky people around the world. So I think that this element of social is absolutely key, and the element of European, is also absolutely key. I believe that the biggest problem that we have in front of us is, for this campaign, is the possibility of creating a sort of avalanche effect, a synergy effect between the initiative the European institution will take, notably the carbon adjustment the border carbon adjustment, measures, and the implementation of the Green Deal, the activities that are done at national level for different kind of change in the taxation, and also changing the structure of subsidies so that it's possible to phase out from fossil subsidies, or in any case environmental damaging subsidies, to reorientate once again the financial support that we give to economic activity, and of course the budget and the recovery fund. I think that all of this can be linked so as to create a powerful push for a carbon pricing, which will be useful to create own resources, and therefore will be useful for financing the policies, as basically everybody of us said. So I really believe that the challenge for our campaign is to be able in the 6 months to come, if this postponement is confirmed, of creating a synergy. And I believe that the role of the European Union, of the European Parliament here, is really key, and that the group that is now led, or in any case composed, also formed by Sandro, must become bigger and bigger, and we must be really able to connect this campaign to what the European Parliament and in general the European institutions will be able to decide, and notably this question of the own resources, because in this way our campaign will have a big sense, and it will be easier to create the synergies necessary, not only to collect 1 million signatures, but also to have a European Union level decision that will go in this direction, and that therefore will be able to overcome possibly the problem of the unanimity. Also, I believe, and I will conclude here, this will be my last point, that this whole discussion must be linked to the general issue of the democratic reform of the European Union. And I think that this issue of the constituent role of the European Parliament has been there for a long time. I remember that when I met Alberto, we were doing this campaign at the beginning of the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. Both of us were much younger, but not nicer. And I think that this campaign has to be taken up again. But since it takes two to tango, we have to get the European Parliament to get its act together, because over the last, unfortunately, decade or so, this role, or even more, this constituent role was not taken by the European Parliament itself. So it is very difficult for us from outside to push for something that the European Parliament itself doesn't want to take. So I believe that this campaign is linked to many others campaigns, and I think that this is the way through which we can strengthen it. It's not only about carbon pricing, it's also about giving resources to finance the good policies, to have more instrument to exert our democratic rights, and at the end of the day, to make of this world a better place.
Thank you, Monica. And I would like to conclude with a last question for all of you, because when it comes to the European Citizen Initiative, on one side you have the policy that you're proposing. On the other side, it's an instrument of transnational politics, but also an exercise of participation and political rights as European citizens. And I think it's very interesting and challenging to try to organize a mobilization that goes beyond the member states, but the opportunity is also to create forms of transnational action and participation, and a debate that is among citizens, committee organizations that maybe sometimes don't work together, which might be unified through the instrument of the European Citizen Initiative. And then there is the element of information and the media. So I know it seems a big leap, but what's your take on the public sphere, the European public sphere, and as federalists, as European citizens, as people that promote a true sense of European citizenship? What's your take on the media coverage on, for example, the Green New Deal, the policies that we are discussing, but also the level of information that the citizens have as European citizens in taking part of these type of initiatives? Because I think my take is that you can have the best policy, the best political campaign, but if there is nothing such a European public sphere, then it's more and more difficult to go beyond the national state interest, and also how national states impact the activities of their citizens active on campaigns. So I would like to conclude with this idea of the European public sphere, which it's part of the process of a federal European Union. Maybe we'll start with Alberto, Monica, and Sandro.
Yes, so I will only stress this point. Well, for instance, the importance of Fridays for Future. Fridays for Future has played a very big role to launch a campaign for stopping global warming and trying to move political institutions in order to find a solution to curbing carbon emission. But they need to be in touch with the institution, because the solution cannot come only at the European level by the European institution. So I think that we have a role to play as an initiative with our initiative of Stop Global Warming and the European Citizen Initiative, and as federalists. We must create a link between public opinion and the institution. And the most important institution, as Monica said, is the European Parliament. The Commission has taken the initiative, but the European Parliament has a decisive role to play in order to implement the policy that are suggested by the Commission, and trying to push the Council towards agreement in first instance about the next generation EU, but generally in order to support all the measures that are needed for ecological and social transition. So I see our initiative as a way to connect public opinion and institution, and as such, I see my role, our role, as a facilitator in order to put the ideas of ecological transition that are supported by public opinion in the public discussion, especially towards the European Parliament. And for my conclusion is that in any case, this campaign is important. This campaign is important to show to the institution that if the right policies are implemented, there is an agreement by the public opinion. But we need the support also of the people that are able to inform public opinion. And from this point of view, I think that the role of a group like the Union of European Federalists is very important, because European Federalists are spread all over Europe. There are groups in every country, groups in many cities, and this is our role as Federalists, to inform the public opinion about the possibility to implement the right policy at the European level.
Grazie Alberto, Monica, and then Sandro for conclusions in general.
Well, I don't have much to add to what I said earlier. I must say that having participated to the to the whole process that brought to the adoption of the ECI as a major instrument of democracy and participatory democracy, I must say that I was very disappointed of the result. In the sense that what we actually wanted was something in which the participation of citizens would have been a little bit more direct and could have been also extended to the reform of the European treaties. And also that with a mechanism through which the European Commission would have been a little bit more obliged, if you want to take into account what the citizens say. I believe that this notwithstanding, first of all, there are a lot of calls to make a reform of this ECI and to make it stronger. And I think that this would be very good. But I believe that the European Parliament must play a role in making the voice of citizens heard. Now, why was this initiative a little bit limited and linked and a little bit tied to so many big conditions? Because in some cases the institutions are afraid of what the citizens are saying, and they were afraid of giving too much space to anti-European or not particularly productive questions or campaigns by citizens. But the reality proves that only those citizens who are very motivated by European affairs and very motivated by Europe as an instrument are also motivated to use the European Citizens Initiative. So there is a major responsibility from the part of the European institutions, and in particular from the European Parliament, also as an institution that controls the European Commission, to give value, to give visibility, to give strength to what the citizens do. And I think that what I mean by giving visibility is the fact that if there is a campaign on a ECI, the European Parliament should be involved, should be informed, and that's why I think it's very important was what Sandro and his friends are doing, because this helps also the credibility of the instrument of the ECI. And I hope that since, as I said before, we really need to create a synergy above all on this question concerning the Green Deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sandro, if you want to close, also because we are also being shared on the Union of European Federalists page, so maybe you can close with a call for the Federalist community to support the campaign and all the forms that they have in mind.
Absolutely.
That we all do.
The call is there. The Union of European Federalists is committed and will be even more committed after this Facebook live chat that we've done. We strongly believe in this initiative for all the political, financial, ecological, and social reasons that have been listed by Monica and by Alberto. To answer to your question, I strongly believe that we will never get a truly fully achieved European democracy without transnational politics. And that if we must promote transnational politics, first of all, by better using the instrument that we have at our disposal. And certainly the European Citizen Initiative is one of these. I do believe that direct democracy is not a threat to representative democracy. I think that direct democracy can nurture a representative democracy, can complement, can encourage, can stimulate. So we shouldn't be scared of the citizen initiative. On the contrary, we should encourage them. And I think that this is a strong element that plays in favor of the building up of a truly transnational space. I think that in the future, we have to further simplify the European Citizen Initiative. Is still pretty complicated to launch them. So, I mean, we must further simplify this process. But first of all, we have to become more active on one side as citizens. On the other side, we have to break down the walls of national politics. We are living in Europe in a paradoxical situation where we are privileged in the world because we are the only citizen in the world which every 5 years elect a continental parliament. We are a citizen that in this parliament we have European groups with a member of the parliament coming from different countries, but we haven't really promoted truly European transnational movement and truly European political parties. There are European political parties, but we have to do much more to make them truly transnational, truly transnational movements. And we have many elements to promote this. One of these is to introduce, which is one battle that we have been fighting and we will fight against in this legislature, to introduce a transnational list to give to double the power of choice of European voters, that they can vote not only national list but also transnational list presented in one single European constituency. We want to double the choice because this would be a stronger legitimacy to current and future European political parties, European political movements. And I think that promoting European Citizen Initiative, assuming a stronger role as constitutional player in the European Parliament, notably in the perspective of the Conference on the Future of Union, promote a true European political movement, also, not only, but also through the national list, will make the media move. We have to reverse the approach. We don't have to wait for the media. We have to wake up the media with citizen initiative, with new political movement, with a truly transnational political parties, and once that we create the event, the media will follow. And I think that, it very much, not everything, but very much depends also on us, on our commitment, and on our strength to break down these national wars, which are totally out of history, because after all, politics is the only activity which wants to remain prisoner of national wars. I mean, whereas climate, digital, migratory flows, everything is global, everything is European. You got only politics that want to stay prisoner of national wars. Let's break down, and also initiative like the StopGlobalWarming.eu can help us to break down this wall.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Sandro Gozi, Monica Frassoni, and Alberto Majocchi for this travel to the carbon pricing policy. I thank everyone who watched the video and who watched it again, inviting everyone to sign and get others to sign on StopGlobalWarming.eu. Have a good Tuesday evening.
Thank you.
Sign. Ciao.
Ciao.